Welcome to the Darkling Radio, where every story drags you deeper into the unknown. Here, you'll hear chilling horror tales, told in an immersive style that will keep you on edge long after the video ends. Sophie Langley and Marcus Reed arrived at the deserted Ashford Hotel seeking a quiet night's stay. But room 13 had been waiting for someone like them. The walls hid secrets, shadows moved on their own, and the air whispered warnings they couldn't understand. What lurked in that room was far more terrifying than either of them could imagine. I had never stayed in this hotel before, but something about it drew me in like a magnet. Its sign, peeling and faded, swayed in the wind with a creak that sounded almost like a warning. The building looked tired, worn down by time, yet strangely inviting, as if it had secrets it wanted to share with the right visitor. The moment I stepped inside, I was hit by a mix of dust and dampness, a smell that clung to my clothes and made my throat itch. The lobby was dimly lit, with one flickering lamp casting shadows that stretched across the walls like dark fingers. A pale, quiet man stood behind the reception desk. He handed me my key with a nervous glance toward the staircase. I tried to smile, but it felt forced. My room number was 13. I told myself it was just a number, yet a small knot of unease twisted in my stomach. The hallway leading to room 13 was narrow and smelled faintly of mildew. The carpet was threadbare, dotted with stains that could have been water or something else. The walls were a dull yellow, the paint chipped and peeling in places. The flickering lights overhead cast long shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. As I walked, the temperature dropped slightly, making me shiver despite the summer heat outside. The closer I got to my room, the more oppressive the air felt, heavy and almost solid. When I reached the door, I hesitated. My hand trembled as I inserted the key. There was a click, and the door swung open with a creak that echoed down the hall. The room was small, almost suffocating. A single bed sat in the center, the sheets thin and worn. A lamp on the nightstand flickered intermittently, casting shadows that danced across the walls. The window looked out onto a courtyard, but the glass was dirty, distorting the view so that the trees appeared twisted and alive. I unpacked quickly, trying to ignore the creeping sense of dread. Something about the room felt wrong, though I couldn't pinpoint it. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to calm my racing thoughts. That's when I noticed a faint outline on the wall opposite me, like a door had been bricked over but left a shadow behind. My pulse quickened. I pressed my ear against the wall, half expecting to hear nothing, but then there was a soft, dragging sound, almost like fingernails scraping across wood. I pulled back, heart hammering, and the sound stopped abruptly. I sat upright, gripping the edge of the bed, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time felt distorted in that room. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me, every sound amplified in the silence. I kept glancing at that wall, that door that shouldn't exist, feeling as if it were watching me in return. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind against the window made me jump. Then came the cold. It started at my feet and crept upward, a creeping chill that made my skin crawl. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, but it did little to help. My eyes were fixed on the door, the ordinary hotel door at the end of the hallway, and yet it seemed wrong. When I blinked, it was slightly ajar, though I was certain I had locked it. My heart pounded as a whisper reached my ears, soft and unintelligible, like someone calling my name from just beyond understanding. The dragging sound returned, louder this time, circling the room as if moving beneath the floor, across the walls, under the bed. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, but the shadows seemed alive. They stretched, twitched, and shifted in ways that no shadow should. My lamp flickered violently, and for a moment, the room went dark, leaving me paralyzed with fear. When the light returned, the outline of the hidden door was clearer, slightly open, as if inviting me to look inside. My stomach churned. I didn't want to see what was behind it, yet I felt an irresistible pull, a curiosity that mingled with terror. I sat on the bed, shivering, my mind racing with every horror story I had ever heard about room 13, hotels, and cursed places. The dragging continued, steady, patient, as if it were waiting for me to move closer, to make a mistake. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to shut it out, but the sound was inside my skull now, echoing, insistent, like something breathing just beneath the floorboards. And then I noticed the shadows on the wall were no longer just shadows. They stretched, curling at the edges, forming shapes that seemed vaguely human, yet impossibly distorted. One of them reached toward me, fingers long and thin, dragging across the ceiling before vanishing into the corner. I couldn't scream. My body refused to respond. All I could do was watch, heart hammering, as the door crept wider, revealing darkness that seemed to go on forever. As the night pressed on, I realized with a cold certainty that I was not alone. Something had been in the room all along, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. I pulled the blanket over my head, but even under its thin protection, I felt it moved closer, circling me, patient, waiting, and in the dim flicker of the lamp, I saw it, a pale hand, pressed flat against the wall of that hidden door, almost human, almost real, yet impossibly wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. And as I lay there, staring at the faint outline of the door that had never been there before, I understood something terrifying. Room 13 was awake. It was alive, and it had noticed me. The next morning I tried to convince myself that what had happened was just a nightmare, a product of fatigue and overactive imagination. But the moment I stepped out into the hallway, the oppressive weight of the hotel pressed down on me again. The air was still heavy, the carpet smelled faintly of damp decay, and the shadows from the flickering lights seemed to linger longer than they should. Every guest I passed avoided eye contact. Some glanced at room 13 as if they feared it might swallow them whole. I felt a chill run down my spine, realizing that something about that room unsettled everyone, not just me. Breakfast was eerily quiet. The clinking of cutlery on plates sounded unnaturally loud in the otherwise silent dining area. I sat alone, trying to eat, but the food seemed tasteless, and my appetite had vanished. I kept thinking about the hidden door and the dragging noises from the night before. I told myself I had to leave, that checking out would solve everything, yet some part of me was compelled to stay. Curiosity, or perhaps fear, had a grip on me stronger than reason. That night, I found myself lying in bed, heart thudding as the shadows began to stretch along the walls. The dragging sound returned, slower this time, deliberate, circling the room with a patience that made my skin crawl. I pressed my back against the headboard, trying to convince myself it was just the building settling, but the sound was too precise, too rhythmic to be natural. It moved beneath the bed, across the walls, even through the ceiling above me. Then I saw it, a figure, standing at the foot of my bed. Its face was hidden in darkness, but I could feel its gaze penetrating me. I froze, unable to move or breathe. The lamp flickered violently, casting erratic shadows that made the figure appear to sway, almost alive. It took a slow step forward. My mind raced, searching for some explanation. Was it a hallucination? My imagination? But the dragging sound continued, matching the figure's movements perfectly, a sinister choreography that terrified me more than the figure itself. I reached for my phone on the nightstand to call for help. It wasn't there. I had left it in plain sight, yet now it had vanished. My pulse quickened as panic gripped me. The figure inched closer, and I felt the air around me grow colder, heavier, pressing against my chest like a physical weight. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My limbs refused to obey, as if they were paralyzed by the presence before me. Suddenly it vanished. One moment it was there, the next nothing remained but the faint outline of that hidden door, now slightly ajar. I stared at it, breath uneven, convinced that it had something to do with the figure. I wanted to move toward it, to see what lay beyond, but fear rooted me to the bed. Every instinct screamed at me to leave the hotel, to never return. Yet my curiosity clawed at me, whispering that the truth awaited behind that door. Minutes or hours passed. Time had no meaning in that room. The shadows clung to the walls like living things, twisting and curling in ways that made no sense. I could hear whispers, faint and unintelligible, almost like someone reciting my thoughts aloud. My body trembled uncontrollably. The room seemed smaller, more confining, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Then came a sound I will never forget, a soft, deliberate dragging that grew louder, closer, circling me with precision. It was not beneath the floorboards this time. It was everywhere, from the ceiling, from the walls, from under the bed. I realized with horror that it was surrounding me. My eyes darted to the outline of the hidden door. It was wider now, almost beckoning. A shiver ran through me as I saw the faintest movement within the darkness. Something or someone was standing there, waiting. I tried to move again, but my body refused. The lamp flickered one final time and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I felt a presence brush past me, cold and wet, like a hand gliding across my skin. I stumbled backward, hitting the bed with a thud, heart racing, lungs burning. In the darkness I could hear soft, shallow breathing, too steady and deliberate to be mine. Then I felt something leaning over me, close enough that I could feel its breath. Its weight pressed against the side of my body, and a whisper brushed against my ear. I couldn't make out the words, but the meaning was clear. It knew me. It had been waiting. The lamp suddenly flickered back to life, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a pale, featureless face inches from mine. Its eyes were hollow, endless voids, and its mouth stretched into a smile that was impossibly wide. I recoiled, my heart hammering, and in that instant it vanished. The room was empty again. The hidden door remained slightly open, darkness spilling from it like ink. I lay on the bed, trembling, realizing that the figure wasn't gone, it was still there, lurking just beyond my sight, waiting for me to make the next mistake. Sleep became impossible after that night. Every shadow in the room seemed to twitch with a life of its own. Every creak and groan of the building amplified in my ears. I stopped trying to rationalize the noises. There was no explanation that made sense. My body ached from tension. My mind felt stretched thin. And yet, despite every instinct screaming at me to leave, I couldn't tear myself away from the room. Something about room 13 had me trapped not physically, but in a way far worse. The first thing I noticed that evening was the floorboards. Tiny scratches, claw-like marks, had appeared where there had been none before. I traced them with my fingers, and a shiver ran through me. They led toward the hidden door, vanishing into its darkness as if whatever made them had passed through without leaving a trace. Objects in the room began to move on their own. A cup of water toppled slowly, spilling across the nightstand, and a chair that had been pushed against the wall rotated just enough to face me. I froze, unable to explain it. My logical mind refused to accept what was happening, yet my senses screamed that the room was alive. I could feel it watching me. Not just the shadows or the air, but something conscious, something patient. It seemed to learn my habits, anticipate my movements. Every time I turned my head, the shadows stretched differently, curling in ways that suggested attention. And then there were the whispers, soft, unintelligible, but unmistakably there. At first I thought I was imagining them, but their timing was too precise, always following the movement of the hidden door. One night, driven by a mix of terror and morbid curiosity, I approached the hidden door. The closer I got, the heavier the air became. My hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling violently. The moment I touched it, a cold wind shot out, slamming it open wider than it should have been possible for a wall. Beyond it was a narrow hallway, impossibly long for the size of the room, stretching into darkness that seemed to absorb the flickering light from my lamp. Footsteps echoed from deep within that hallway. Slow, deliberate, measured steps, drawing nearer with every heartbeat. My stomach twisted as I realized that the dragging sounds from the past nights were coming from within. I wanted to retreat, but something rooted me to the spot. My eyes adjusted and I saw the walls lined with photographs, faded, yellowed, and torn. They depicted previous guests of the hotel. Each one stared directly at the camera, eyes wide, expressions frozen in terror. What made me nauseous was that the eyes of every guest had been scratched out, leaving empty voids. I reached the last photograph, and my blood ran cold. The person in the photo was unmistakably me, or rather a version of me. The expression, the angle, even the tremor in the hands matched perfectly. My breathing grew shallow. How could this be possible? The photograph seemed to pulse subtly, as if alive. I took a step back, and the floor beneath me groaned. The shadows in the room twisted toward the photograph, converging like dark smoke. I stumbled backward, almost tripping over the bed. The hallway beyond the hidden door seemed to stretch farther, deeper than humanly possible. The whispers grew louder, forming a chorus that pressed against my skull. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block them out, but the sounds were inside my mind now, echoing in rhythm with the dragging steps. I realized, with growing horror, that the hallway was not static. It moved, reshaped itself, leading my eyes deeper into its darkness, deeper into something I couldn't understand. Then came movement in the photograph. My figure blinked, subtly at first, then turned its head to look directly at me. Its lips curled into a smile that I had never worn. A smile impossibly wide, and impossibly wrong. A whisper floated from the photograph, brushing against my thoughts. "It's your turn." My heart raced, and I tried to pull away, but my feet were anchored to the spot. My body refused to obey. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, shadows expanding and contracting like lungs, pushing me forward toward the hallway, toward the photograph that now felt alive. The lamp flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for a moment that stretched like an eternity. I heard the dragging sound circle me, coming from above, below, and all around. The shadows reached higher, merging with the darkness of the hallway, pulling at my awareness. And then, just as suddenly, the lamp flickered back on. The hallway was empty, silent, but the photograph still glowed faintly. My face stared back at me, twisted in that unnatural smile, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I wasn't alone and that the next night, the room would be ready to claim me. By the fourth night, I had lost all sense of safety. The hotel no longer felt like a building. It felt like a living entity, observing, breathing, and waiting. The shadows clung to the corners of the room, stretching across walls and ceiling, always just out of reach, always moving when I wasn't looking directly at them. I avoided mirrors and reflective surfaces because even a glimpse of my own reflection seemed to distort, twisting into shapes that were not my own. Each glance revealed something subtly wrong: eyes that lingered too long, smiles too wide, angles that shouldn't exist. The hidden door became impossible to ignore. It was no longer just a faint outline. It pulsed like a heartbeat, faintly glowing in the dim light of my flickering lamp. Every instinct told me to leave, yet some compulsion held me there, chained to the room by fear and curiosity. I began noticing things I hadn't before. Scratches on the walls, shallow grooves that formed symbols I didn't recognize. The air around the door felt heavier, almost viscous, as if it were a membrane separating my world from another. I found a journal tucked under the mattress, pages yellowed and brittle. Its entries were frantic, written by previous guests, each describing the same horrors I had experienced. The dragging noises, the moving objects, the shadows that watched. Some wrote of disappearing entirely, vanishing into the darkness of the hidden hallway. My stomach turned as I read the last entry. The handwriting was mine. The date was yesterday. My pulse surged. How could this be? I had never seen this journal before, and yet the words were fresh, alive, written with my own hand. That night, the room seemed to pulse with expectation. The dragging sound returned, more insistent than ever, moving under the bed, along the walls, circling me like a predator calculating its strike. My lamp flickered violently, plunging the room into moments of blackness, where I could feel something brushing past me, breathing cold into my skin. I tried to block it out, but the feeling was all-encompassing, invading my senses, making it impossible to ignore. I approached the hidden door again, compelled by a mixture of terror and a sick curiosity. The moment my fingers brushed the knob, a sudden gust of icy wind slammed it open. The narrow hallway stretched infinitely into darkness, impossibly long and wider than it should have been for the confines of my small room. Figures appeared in the distance, humanoid but distorted, swaying in and out of focus. The dragging grew louder, matching their steps as they moved closer. My heart pounded. I wanted to run, but my feet refused to obey. One figure detached from the others and moved toward me. Its face was featureless, smooth, pale, yet the weight of its gaze pressed down on me. I could feel its intent, a malicious patience that made my skin crawl. My breath caught in my throat as the shadows began to stretch toward it, merging with the darkness of the hallway. I realized with a sudden bone-deep horror that the figures were not merely shadows, they were former guests, trapped within the room, pulled into the hidden hallway. Their forms twisted and distorted by whatever force resided in room 13. The journal trembled beneath my hands, pages flipping wildly as if caught in an invisible wind. Words I hadn't seen before appeared. The room chooses, it consumes. Do not resist. I dropped the book, stepping back, and felt a presence brush against my leg, cold, wet, almost alive. My lamp exploded in a shower of sparks, leaving me in darkness. In the silence I could hear soft breathing, deliberate, patient, pressing into my skull like a memory I could not forget. When the light returned, the hidden door had widened further, darkness spilling into the room like ink. A pale hand, too long and thin to be human, gripped the edge of the doorway. I froze, paralyzed with fear, watching as a faceless head emerged, tilting toward me in curiosity. The shadows in the room rippled, stretching toward the figure, pressing me back into the bed as if the room itself was asserting its dominance. The dragging sound now surrounded me, closer than ever, echoing from every corner of the walls, ceiling, and floor simultaneously. I realized with a growing stomach-churning certainty that leaving the room was no longer an option. The hotel, the shadows, the hidden door, it had all been preparing for me. My body felt heavy, my limbs refusing to obey as I watched the figure extend its hand toward me. The journal lay open on the floor, a single phrase scrawled across the page in bold, desperate letters. It knows you. I collapsed onto the bed, shivering uncontrollably, knowing that the room had not finished with me. The shadows retreated slightly, but the presence lingered, patient, waiting. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but the walls pressed closer, the air thickened, and the dragging grew louder, an eternal echo that promised my torment was only beginning. The hidden door remained slightly open, darkness spilling into my room, a constant reminder that the room was awake, and it had noticed me. I had to escape. By the fifth night, fear had stripped me of every shred of rational thought. The hotel no longer seemed like a building, it was alive, a labyrinth of shadows and whispers designed to trap me. Every step I took along the hallways led me back to room 13, twisting and reshaping itself as if mocking my attempts to leave. The walls pulsed like breathing flesh, the carpets shifted beneath my feet, and the lights flickered, casting erratic shadows that reached for me. I pounded on doors, begging for help, but the echoes returned, distorted, twisted, almost laughing at me. I tried the front door, desperate to flee, but the moment I crossed the threshold of the lobby, the hallways warped again. I found myself back in the corridor outside room 13. Panic clawed at my chest as I realized the room didn't want to release me. Its hunger was patient but inevitable, and I could feel it coiling around my mind, whispering my fears back at me in distorted murmurs. The hidden door pulsed faintly in the corner of my vision, and I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that it was the center of this nightmare. With trembling hands I approached the door. The hallway beyond stretched into infinite darkness, impossibly deep, swallowing the faint light of my lamp. Figures moved within, indistinct and wavering, like ghosts caught between worlds. I could hear them dragging their feet, a chorus of hollow steps that mirrored the sounds that had haunted me for nights. Among them, one figure moved with deliberate intent toward me, and as it drew closer, my stomach twisted in recognition. It was me, or some version of me that had already been claimed by the room. My own face stared back, hollow-eyed and smiling in a way I had never smiled, the expression unnaturally wide and wrong. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, but my body betrayed me. It refused to move, anchored by some invisible force. The shadows swirled around me, pressing, twisting, merging with the darkness beyond the hidden door. I realized that room 13 had a consciousness, a will of its own, and it was now fully aware of me. Every instinct screamed that I should flee, yet I couldn't. My mind was caught in the room's grasp, aware but powerless. The figures in the hallway reached out with elongated hands, some human, some grotesquely distorted. They whispered my name, the sound crawling along the edges of my consciousness. I could see them clearly now, former guests, perhaps, who had been claimed like me. Their faces were faceless, their eyes hollow voids, yet each radiated a familiar sense of desperation and terror. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the oppressive presence that had claimed the room. I turned my gaze to the mirror across the hallway. My reflection shimmered unnaturally. At first it was just me, but then it changed. My eyes widened as I saw the smiler grotesque stretched smile spread across my own face. Behind me, the shadows lengthened, converging into a single mass that seemed to breathe, pulsate, and reach. I tried to step back, but the hallway expanded, stretching infinitely, and I was trapped, drawn forward like a moth toward a flame. The journal I had found under the mattress earlier floated in the air, pages turning by themselves. A single line glowed on the page. "You belong here now." The words seemed to echo in my mind, confirming what I had feared for nights. The room did not merely haunt, it consumed. Its purpose was to trap, to distort, to claim any soul that wandered into its grasp. My reflection moved independently now, stepping closer to me through the glass, smiling, beckoning, promising something I did not want but could not resist. I felt a cold, wet weight press against my chest. The dragging sound was everywhere, circling, spinning, pressing into my ears like ice. My body went rigid, and I realized I was no longer in control of my movements. The shadows pulled me toward the hidden door, toward the infinite hallway. I saw the faceless figures reaching for me, hands outstretched, and felt a sickening certainty that I was to join them. My thoughts screamed in terror, yet I was powerless, drawn forward into the darkness that had been waiting for me since the first night. Then, just as I was about to be consumed completely, the world shuddered. My vision blurred, the room twisting violently, and I felt a flash of consciousness break free for a brief moment. The mirror reflected nothing now but empty darkness. My body collapsed to the floor, chest heaving, heart hammering. The lamp flickered once more, casting shadows that stretched toward the ceiling. Even now, as I struggle to write this, I cannot be certain I am truly free. I feel its presence, cold and patient, lingering just beyond perception. Room 13 does not release its prey easily. Somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the hidden door, it waits, and I know, with a horror I cannot shake, that the next guest will be greeted with the same silent, patient hunger and perhaps, in some unfathomable way, I am still inside, watching, waiting,